My brother's girlfriend accused me of false allegations, and my wife believed her. I lost my family, my friends, and my reputation, but I also found a new love, a new child, and a new hope. What happened there? Before starting the story, please subscribe to our YouTube channel, Story Podcast Book. I am looking for some advice and direction on how to deal with the situation I am facing and what to do next. Please forgive any errors. I just want to get this off my chest. A little bit about me. I am a 39-year-old male and the younger of two brothers. I will tell you everything in chronological order so you have all the details. My brother, Henry, who is 41 years old, was always the favorite child in our family. He could never do anything wrong in their eyes. Some examples of how they favored him over me were when he got poor grades in school, my parents would encourage him and help him improve, while I always got the "I'm so disappointed with this result" speech, even though I had done well. When he graduated from high school, he got a new car and a big party, and for my graduation, I got $500 and a pat on the back. He was not a bad brother, but we mostly did our things. I didn't make a fuss, but I needed to move out and discover things on my own. For the next few years, I studied in a different city and got my MBA in 5 years. I found a job in my hometown and moved back. I didn't have much contact with my family during this time, except for birthdays and holidays. My brother was not very smart. He barely passed high school. He quit college, and my parents helped him start a small hardware store so he could make a living. I was happy for him, but I had my own life. I also had a girlfriend, Jenny, who was 22 years old and from the same city. We met in college and moved in together when we came back home. She also got a job soon enough, and we focused on our lives and each other. It was during the holidays of 2006 when I introduced her to my family. They were surprisingly nice and welcoming to her, and also made me feel more loved than I ever felt in the previous 22 years. I saw my brother staring at her during the whole gathering, but I didn't think much of it. After that, he started visiting my apartment too often. We went from seeing each other once every 3 months to almost every day. I had to set some boundaries and tell him that he could come sometimes, but I didn't like him being in my place every day, especially in the evening when Jenny and I were both at home and trying to relax after a busy day at work. That caused a huge fight with my parents. He eventually apologized and said he would leave me alone. From then on, he only came once a month on a weekend, which I was fine with, and he tried to chat with Jenny, which I didn't mind as long as it was nothing more than that. Things continued like this for a while, and in 2009, I asked her to marry me, and we told our engagement to the whole family. My parents were happy for me, but my brother just congratulated me and left the small party I had planned for this occasion. After that, I didn't hear from him for a few weeks. We got married in 2010, and I noticed that my brother brought a +1, and he said he was dating her. I'll call her Kate for this story. I hoped that he could finally get over his feelings for Jenny and focus on his own life. They moved very fast too, getting married almost 9 months later in 2011. Our marriage was going well. We had our first daughter, Alice, in 2011, and the second one, Sarah, in 2013. However, my brother's marriage did not work out as they expected, and they split up in 2012. A few weeks after the divorce was final, Kate messaged me that Henry was obsessed with Jenny, and that was the main reason for their breakup. I said I was sorry and wished her the best. I also talked to Jenny and asked her about her interactions with Kate, and she said that Kate was always a bit aloof and unfriendly towards her from the start. I decided to confront my brother in front of my family and asked him why he was ruining his life because he was obsessed with my wife. He was caught off guard by that question and denied everything. We had a huge fight that ended with me forgiving my brother and telling him that he was not welcome in my house anymore. Both my parents and Jenny talked to me and persuaded me that he was still family no matter what. So for everyone's sake, I decided to be civil. It was then that it seemed like he was working on himself, and we moved on with our lives. Fast forward to 2015, and I still remember that day clearly. It was the 25th of July, and I was doing a lot of chores. My wife took both our kids to see their grandparents. It was sometime after lunch that I got a call from my father, telling me to come to their house and sounding very angry. As soon as I got there, I sensed a lot of stress in the air. My wife was sobbing, and my parents were trying to comfort her. Some of my relatives were there too. I asked what was going on, only to be called the SA person word by my parents. I was shocked and confused. They said that at a party I went to a couple of weeks ago, I had SA'd a girl, and then texted her to not tell anyone about it, or else there would be consequences. I had known this girl, Amanda, for a while. We went to high school together, and she was part of the larger group of friends that I sometimes hung out with. According to her, after the party, which was at a club, I followed her to her car and did it there. She shared screenshots of the supposed conversation with my wife and told her the whole story. My father slapped me hard, and my parents told me that they never wanted to see me again. Jenny was furious, and she said that we were over. I tried to convince them all that I never did that, but they didn't listen to me. I was thrown out of their house and told that Jenny and the kids would not come back, and my father would come over to take their stuff from my apartment. When my father came, I begged and pleaded, but he just packed a few bags and told me to never contact them again, and that he would personally hand me over to the cops if I did. By evening, Henry had shared the screenshots and all the details with our extended family group on WhatsApp, and I was kicked out by everyone. Things went on like this for a few days, and I even had people from my friend group calling me to say they were appalled by me and never to talk to them again. I was a wreck during that time. I couldn't eat, I couldn't sleep, I couldn't even work properly. My boss also heard the rumors going around but couldn't do anything until he saw some police action against me. He suggested that I quit the organization on my own to keep my record clean, and that he would make sure that I didn't have to serve my notice period. I tried to defend myself, but he told me that if the cops showed up at my door, I would be fired anyway, and in that case, the seriousness of the case meant I wouldn't get severance and my record would be ruined. I reluctantly agreed to his request, and I left the organization in the next few days. In mid-August, while I was still drowning in my sorrow, I got 2 documents from the court. One was a letter of disownment, and the other was divorcing papers. I was very drunk, but I went to my parents' place anyway, only for my brother to come and beat me up and tell me that I was a shame to the family, and it was good that I was disowned. I had blood coming out of my face by the time he was done with me and barely able to stand. My parents and my wife looked at me from a distance, but did nothing. I managed to get up after a while, a crying mess, and realized that I had lost everything and everyone I cared about. I stayed locked up in my apartment for the duration of the divorce. It went as smoothly as it could. As I was jobless, plus my now ex-parents said they would pay for the child, I didn't have to pay child support or any alimony. By January 2016, I was divorced, but trying to rebuild the life that was once mine was hard. During this time, I also felt like confronting Amanda. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized it could have made things worse for me due to the women-centric laws in my country meant one phone call, and I would be facing 5-6 years in prison. In February 2016, I had a major accident and spent a good part of 5 weeks in recovery. The staff told me that they contacted my emergency number, which was still Jenny at that point, and she hung up and no one came. Once I recovered, I realized that I had used up a good part of my savings and I needed to get back on my feet, if not for anything else, to have a roof over my head. However, I realized that I couldn't do anything in the place I was in, so I sold all my furniture, paid my remaining dues for the rented accommodation, and decided to start from scratch in a different place. I moved to a city 2 hours away and tried to get a job for a while, but with no luck. I also used to drink myself stupid, and thoughts of killing myself were frequent. Waking up after having a nightmare to a cold sweat almost became normal. For 4 months, this went on until I ran into an old acquaintance, James, from college. He was the quiet kid back then and didn't talk to anyone, but seeing him after so many years was strange, as he spotted me out from the crowd and called my name. We greeted each other and talked about our lives for a bit. I told him I was in the city looking for a job. He told me he had just quit and was planning on setting up a management consulting firm of his own. He then invited me to a drink later on, where after a lot of talking about our professional lives, he offered me an opportunity to work with him as he needed a few people who knew their stuff. At this point, I thought I needed to work my ass off to get my mind off these thoughts. So I agreed, but I told him I wanted to meet him and his team and talk to them before we move forward. 2 days later, he introduced me to another guy, Derek, and told me that it would be just the 3 of us for now. I shook hands with Derek and told them that before we went any further, I had something to say. I then proceeded to tell them everything that had happened to me during that time, and how I was disowned and divorced because of it, with tears coming out in between. James and Derek told me that they felt bad for me, but also told me that if I had no criminal record, then there would be no problem. I said that the police never came to my house, and they were relieved. James did say that to be on the safe side, he was going to ask someone to run a full background check, and I understood his position and agreed. During this time, I was living in a rundown place that I rented to reduce my expenses. I waited patiently for 2 weeks but was still looking for jobs in other places in case things didn't work out. 2 weeks later, James called me and we met up later that day. He said my record was clear of any SA and welcomed me to the team. After that, I threw myself into my work and started therapy sessions. On Derek's advice, I also joined a gym and vented a lot of my anger on the punching bag and went from an average 70 kilos to a buff 98 kilos. Derek and I became gym buddies, and I looked at him as an older brother as he was Henry's age. By the end of 2018, I had a good amount of control back in my life. The consulting firm took off and the money came in. I rented out a nice apartment in a decent neighborhood. The Band-Aid also came off to some extent, and I realized I needed to take some necessary steps to move on. I went to a courthouse and changed my last name officially on record. I adopted Derek's last name after his and his parents' approval. They saw me as a nice guy and involved me in a lot of their family events, including me being the best man for Derek's wedding, so this was a way of thanking them as well. I tried dating a bit, but it never worked out for me due to my emotional issues, until I started dating Kim, 28, in 2019. She was half Korean and half Italian. I met her at a coffee place where I got my coffee and sometimes sat there. She worked behind the counter. We only saw each other for the order, but once when Derek and I were there, and he noticed that she was constantly looking at me, he told me that I should ask her out. I approached her a bit hesitantly and asked her out for drinks later that day. We had a nice date, and she said that she hoped we could see each other again. I knew that this was going to go the same way as my other dates, which was I told them about my past, and they ran away, and I never blamed any of them. But the second time I took Kim for lunch, I decided to tell her before she went ahead. I wanted to let her know of my past, so she could make an informed decision. It was like she was shocked. I told her that I never did, and never could do that to anyone, and I was still struggling to move on from the aftermath, and that she needed to know what she was getting into before we even thought of going for any more dates. A couple of days later, I got a call from Kim, and she told me she wanted to meet up. We met at the same coffee place where she worked, and she told me that she trusted me and said that she wanted to give it a try. At this point, I was doubtful and even cried a bit because I couldn't believe that I could even find a bit of normalcy restored in my life. We dated a few times and liked each other, and it felt that I was finally able to start healing. I went on my first vacation in years with her to Europe and had a wonderful time overall. When the pandemic hit in 2020, we stayed in touch over the phone and FaceTime. When things got back to some level of normalcy in the latter half, she asked if she could move in with me, and I agreed. She lost her job at the coffee shop and was trying her luck with job hunting. She was a fantastic cook, and that's when I suggested that maybe she could try and set up a place and get into the food business. By mid-2021, and with the financial support of her parents, she had a cloud kitchen set up which delivered food to the nearby areas. Both our lives were going well. I still had a lot of emotional issues though. I no longer had thoughts of killing myself, but the nightmares continued sometimes. Kim announced in February 2023 that she was pregnant, and a range of mixed emotions came over me, from being overjoyed to starting all over again to crying out for the loss of what I once had. I was all over the place. Kim comforted me, and we fell asleep in each other's arms. A couple of days later, I proposed to her, and she was ecstatic. It felt like everything was finally moving to a point where I could have some semblance of peace with my life. We were set to be married, and all the preparations were in full swing for my wedding in mid-June this year. At the end of May, I got a call from an unknown number. When I answered, I could hear someone cry. She said, "Hi, it's Amanda." I instantly recognized that voice and hung up, trying to hold back my anger. Kim was with me, saw my face, and came over concerned. I was trying to hold back my mix of tears and anger, and told her who it was, when the call came in again. This time, Kim answered the phone and put it on speaker. There was a guy on the other side, and he explained that he was Amanda's fiancé, and she wanted to come clean over what she said back then. She got on the phone and kept apologizing over and over again and kept crying nonstop. Kim did most of the talking as I became a sobbing mess, not sure what I wanted to do. So, Kim said that they would call back. She immediately called Derek over, who listened to everything patiently as Kim explained what had happened. He hugged me and advised that we should set up a meeting at a lawyer's place with her confession so that it could help out in case of any future possible issues. I called up my lawyer and explained everything. To him, he said he would set up a meeting in his office and gave me a time and date. I called Amanda and told her that she had to come over to my lawyer's office and we would discuss it there. 3 days later, we met up at his office. Amanda looked half dead. With her expression, her fiancé was the only person who was with her. My lawyer set up the meeting with a camera to record the entire meeting. I asked him to mediate, and I asked Kim to come with me. We sat across the room, and she started to explain in detail what had happened back then. A lot of things were said and discussed, but here's the gist of it. She and my brother were dating back in 2015, but no one knew. He was the person behind the entire SA plan. She went along because she loved him and would do anything for him. He got a new phone and stole my profile pic from my WhatsApp number back then, and they used it to create the fake screenshots by chatting back and forth with Amanda. I went from sobbing to filled with fury. I can honestly say that if it wasn't for Kim, I might have been charged with assault. Kim was pretty angry and worked up as well, partly due to the pregnancy, and she ripped Amanda a new one with her verbal attacks. Though my lawyer tried to keep things civil, it was clear that Kim was pretty pissed off. She went further to tell her fiancé if he still marries this human trash, then he deserves what's coming to him. Fighting back tears and anger, I asked them, why are they coming out and telling me this now? Her fiancé, Mark, came forward and explained. He said that they were very drunk a couple of weeks ago, and she blurted out how she helped an ex ruin a marriage. That stayed with him, and after asking non-stop and pushing her, she finally came clean to him. It was then that he pushed her to admit her mistakes if she wanted peace in her life. After she helped Henry, he started being cold and distant with her and eventually broke up 6 months later. At that point, she felt awful, but was too afraid to come clean and spent a lot of time in therapy trying to deal with her issues. After everything was laid out on the table, my lawyer stepped in and said, let's take a 30-minute break and meet back again. Amanda and Mark stepped out, and our lawyer discussed that if I wanted, he could go after her and my brother for defamation. The evidence available is more than enough for me to do what I want. I was feeling a lot of rage, but I decided I didn't want this to spoil the wedding, and whatever I wanted to do would have to wait till after everything was done. I told Amanda that I would be in touch with her, but for now, I don't want her telling anyone else. I didn't want any drama from my ex-family to affect my wedding. After that meeting, Kim hugged me and told me that she was right in trusting her instincts, and now she feels like a weight had lifted off her shoulders. I shared her feelings. We had a small wedding with both James and Derek being the best men and a 3-week-long honeymoon covering Europe. It was a wonderful time for both of us. Thankfully, I was able to work through what I had heard, and Derek too suggested that I should put this on the back of my mind. It didn't spoil the honeymoon too much, though the nightmares were coming in more often than before during that time, and Kim was always there to support me. I also had a discussion with my therapist who told me that I will need to confront my ex-family sooner or later, if not for anything else, then for closure. After thinking a lot about all that had happened, I decided to reach out to Amanda in July and told her what she needed to do. I told her that I will be taking legal action based on her statement, but if she wants to not be screwed financially, she needed to follow what I told her next. She needed to talk to Jenny alone and explain to her everything she told us back in the lawyer's office. She was crying while listening to me and told me that Mark left her. I told her that I wish I could feel sorry for her, but I don't. Then stated that karma hits everyone hard. It hit her, and now it's coming for my brother. A few days later, I got a text. It was from Jenny. Even though she blocked me, I had been sending her birthday wishes and wishes on both our daughters' birthdays, as well as holiday greetings over text. This was the first message I got in 8 years. She asked if we could talk. I didn't want to be alone when I was having this conversation, so I told her I would call her in a few hours. I got home and was with Kim when the call happened. I could immediately hear Jenny crying uncontrollably for a while, before she told me how sorry she was, and how awful she was feeling right now. I was somehow able to keep my composure all this time. I told her that it hurt knowing that she thought so low of me that she so easily fell for Henry's trap. I asked her about my girls, and they said they were doing well, and then asked when she met Amanda. She said she met her 2 days ago. It took a lot of time to process how wrong she was and how fast she moved on from me. She quickly brought it to the attention of my ex-parents, and they were just as shocked. They all wanted to contact me, but she said she wanted to connect first and apologize. I told her what she had done was beyond painful. I asked what had happened to the golden child. She said that he's been kicked out of the house. I chuckled a bit. She told me she married Henry a year after the divorce was finalized, as he was the one who supported her through this. And suddenly it all made sense. Looks like he never got over her. She told me that she has a daughter with him too. After the discussions, I told her what was going to happen, and a detail of what I wanted. I want her to reach out to all my former extended family, so that they know what a POS he is. Secondly, I am only looking to co-parent my 2 girls, and I do not have any intention of reconciling with her beyond what it takes to have a relationship with my daughters. And third, I will text her the date and time when I want to meet my ex-parents, and I want to meet them in person. After that, I just hugged Kim. Knowing she was pregnant and her mood would have been all over the place, I kept my emotions in check, but I guess she was crying for the both of us, and we fell asleep on the bed. When I woke up the next morning, my phone was off, and when I put it on charge, I noticed the flood of messages that were coming through. I had over 50 missed calls and hundreds of messages. I was also added to the family group message where every single one of them was apologizing. Over the next few days, I started getting messages from some of my friends who were apologizing for what had happened and how they jumped the gun on everything. The only reply I gave was to the family group that since I was disowned almost 8 years ago, I was an outsider in this group and wanted to remain so. Whether I forgive them or not would happen on my terms and my timeline and not theirs. I further told them not to add me back here and left the group. Some of the family members tried to call me out by messaging me that they were disappointed in my reaction, and I shut them down, saying they were not in a position to judge me after being so quick to assume what I did and not contact me again unless I contact them first. A few weeks later, I called up Jenny and told her I wanted her to bring my girls over the weekend so I could see them properly. Kim, being as stubborn and fiery as she is, said she wants to meet her stepdaughters too. We argued a lot. It was mostly me telling her that since she was pregnant, she needed to take care of herself. But the Asian in her was pretty insistent, so I gave in. We met at a public park. Jenny looked a bit messy, but looked like she tried to look as good as possible for this meeting. There I saw Alice and Sarah for the first time in 8 years. They had grown so much. The only memories I had of them were in my phone, as I was pretty blocked from all the socials and everywhere else. Jenny came crying, trying to hug me, and I put both my hands up front to refuse. I then introduced her to Kim as my wife, and she broke down into a sobbing mess in the park. Kim came forward to comfort her, and we sat down in a place nearby. I grabbed both my girls and cried out. My girls were never told about me until recently, and they were pretty confused as they only knew Henry as their father. But seeing me suddenly brought out some emotions. There was a lot of crying and talking, and by the evening, we shared what had happened in our lives. She told me that she married Henry a year after that. He took care of her for the first few years, but after that, things settled down. He still couldn't grow his landscaping business to a point where it was profitable, and then the pandemic forced him to close shop. His parents were now using their savings to try to make ends meet, and he never bothered to start something again despite his parents telling him to. She said she's filing for divorce from Henry and she can't stand the sight of him. I told her she's free to do what she wants and it has nothing to do with me. I told her some details moving forward. I wanted Alice and Sarah to attend family therapy sessions with me going forward so we could heal. They've been robbed of their real father and it was time to make it right, and I want to be part of their lives. I also wanted them to be with me and Kim over the weekends, but I told her that would have to wait as we had a kid of ours coming, and I wanted to put my full energy into that for now. Lastly, she said that my parents wanted to reach out to me. I told her that they were not my parents anymore. I still had the letter of disownment they sent me along with the divorce papers, and I had nothing to do with them. But both she and Kim said that it would help me get closure from them. So I agreed. I told her that I would tell her when and where I wanted to meet them. I booked her a hotel and told her that I wanted her to stay in this city for the night, and I wanted some more time with my girls, with tomorrow being Sunday. We spent that Sunday together as well, but this time I took them to the attractions and around the city, and we had a good time. Before leaving, both of them gave me a warm hug, and I told them I would see them next week. I told her that she doesn't have to drive the girls to the family therapy sessions, and I will come to them. I got a good referral from my therapist for that city, and we had a good first introductory session, but the therapist made it clear that sooner or later they would need to know what my ex-brother did, and I told her they will in due time. She suggested I write it out here and get some outside perspective on my situation as well. I can honestly say if it wasn't for Derek pushing me, I might not have made it to where I am. That's why I'm opening this forum to you. What should I do from here? I plan to confront my ex-parents sooner or later, And even though I call them my ex, I still have emotions and feelings for them. I'm not sure if that makes sense. How do I deal with Henry? I don't think I ever want to see his face again, but do I go after him and ruin him with a defamation suit, knowing very well that he has a daughter from my ex as well, and anything I do to him might affect her? This is a very heartbreaking and emotional story. I feel sorry for what you had to go through, and I admire your strength and resilience. You have been through a lot of pain and betrayal, but you also found love and hope again. You have a beautiful family and a successful career, and you deserve to be happy and at peace. I think you should do what you think is best for you and your family. I cannot tell you what to do, but I can offer some suggestions. If you want to confront your ex-parents and Henry, you should do it safely and legally. You should have your lawyer and your wife with you, and you should be prepared for any possible outcome. You should also think about what you want to achieve from this confrontation. Do you want an apology, an explanation, a closure, or something else? You should also consider how this might affect your daughters and your unborn child. They might have questions or feelings that you need to address. If you decide to sue Henry for defamation, you should weigh the pros and cons of doing so. On one hand, you might get justice and compensation for what he did to you. On the other hand, you might have to deal with a long and stressful legal process, and you might also hurt his daughter, who is innocent in all this. You should also think about how this might affect your relationship with your ex-wife and your daughters. They might have mixed feelings about this, and you might have to deal with some backlash from your ex-family. Whatever you decide to do, I hope you find peace and happiness. You have overcome so much, and you have so much to look forward to. You have a wonderful wife who loves you and supports you, and you have 3 beautiful children who need you and adore you. You have a bright future ahead of you, and you should focus on that. I wish you all the best.